He walked away from $16 million at the age of 30, breaking Jerry Rice's unbreakable single-season receiving record with 1,964 yards, earning the nickname Megatron because he played like a literal transformer. And yet, he never won a single playoff game. In fact, his relationship with the Detroit Lions got so toxic that he initially refused to even attend his own Hall of Fame induction ceremony. Randy Moss said, "If I could build the perfect receiver, it would be Calvin Johnson." And Jerry Rice called him the most talented receiver I've ever seen. But his body was so broken down by age 30 that he could barely walk. So just how good was Calvin Johnson actually? Calvin Johnson Jr. was born 1985 in Noonan, Georgia, and from the moment he could walk, everyone knew something was different about this kid. His parents were both athletes, his dad played college football, and his mom ran track. But Calvin didn't just inherit their genes, he inherited their obsessive work ethic. By the time he was in middle school, Calvin was already 6'2" and could jump out of the gym. He was a two-sport star in high school, dominating both football and track and field. In track, he long jumped over 24 feet, which is insane for a high schooler. And he ran the 100 meters in 10.5 seconds. But on the football field is where he truly separated himself from everyone else. As a senior at Sandy Creek High School, Calvin caught 34 passes for 646 yards and 10 touchdowns. Those numbers don't sound crazy until you realize he was being triple teamed on almost every single play. Opposing coaches literally told the entire secondary to just focus on number 81 and let everyone else beat them. It didn't matter. Calvin was ranked as the number 1 wide receiver in the entire country and had every major program in America offering him scholarships. Florida, Miami, USC, they all wanted him. But Calvin chose Georgia Tech, which surprised everyone because Tech ran a triple option offense that barely threw the ball. When asked why, he said, "I want to challenge myself and prove I can dominate anywhere." And dominate he did. In his freshman year at Georgia Tech, Calvin immediately became the focal point of the offense. The Yellow Jackets changed their entire offensive scheme just to get him the ball. By his sophomore season, he was already being compared to NFL receivers. Then came his junior year in 2006. Calvin put up 76 catches for 1,202 yards and 15 touchdowns. He won the Biletnikoff Award as the best receiver in college football. But it wasn't just the stats, it was how he got them. Calvin was catching passes over 3 defenders, making circus catches look routine. His combination of size, speed, and hands was something scouts had never seen before. At 6'5" and 239 pounds, he ran a 4.35 40-yard dash at the NFL Combine. His vertical leap measured 42.5 inches. He had 11.7-inch hands that could palm a basketball like it was a tennis ball. NFL scouts were literally calling him a once-in-a-generation talent. One scout said, "If you created a receiver in a video game with maxed out stats, it still wouldn't be as good as Calvin Johnson." The 2007 NFL draft arrived and everyone knew Calvin was going to in the top 5. But there was a problem. The Detroit Lions had the 2nd overall pick, and the Lions were a disaster. They'd won just 3 games the year before, and the franchise hadn't won a playoff game since 1991. Still, the Lions couldn't pass up Calvin's talent and selected him with the 2nd pick. Calvin signed a 6-year, $64 million contract with $27.2 million guaranteed, the richest contract ever given to a rookie wide receiver at the time. But nobody in Detroit cared about the money, they just wanted to finally have a star player to build around. Calvin's rookie season started rough. The Lions were still terrible, losing their first 6 games, but in Week 7 against the Chicago Bears at Soldier Field, Calvin showed everyone why he was worth the hype. Early in the second quarter, the Lions run a simple go route. Calvin lines up against Charles Tillman, one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. The ball gets thrown up, and Calvin just goes up and over Tillman. We're talking about jumping completely over a 6'2" defender, snatches the ball with one hand and takes it 70 yards for a touchdown. Bears fans sat there in stunned silence. Calvin finished his rookie year with 48 catches for 756 yards and 4 touchdowns. Solid numbers, but nothing spectacular. The Lions went 7-9, which was actually an improvement, but then 2008 happened. The 2008 Detroit Lions became the first team in NFL history to go 0-16. It was a complete disaster. They lost games by an average of 16 points. Their offense was a joke. Their defense was worse. And Calvin Johnson was stuck in the middle of it all. Despite being on the worst team in NFL history, Calvin still put up 78 catches for 1,331 yards and 12 touchdowns. He was getting double and triple teamed every single play and still averaging 17 yards per catch. But nobody cared because the Lions kept losing. After the season, Calvin went into a training facility and broke down. He'd gone from being a national champion contender at Georgia Tech to being on the worst team in NFL history. Teammates said he cried in the locker room multiple times, but Calvin wasn't a quitter. In 2010, everything changed. The Lions drafted Matthew Stafford first overall in 2009, and now Calvin finally had a quarterback who could get him the ball. That's when the Megatron nickname was born. Week 4 against the Dallas Cowboys, Calvin lines up against Mike Jenkins and Orlando Scandrick, two solid corners. The Cowboys know the ball's going to Calvin, and they don't care. Stafford throws it up, and Calvin goes up between both defenders, catches it at the highest point, literally like it's playing NBA Jam, and then drags both of them for 5 extra yards before 3 more Cowboys have to tackle him. Lions tight end Brandon Pettigrew turns to the sideline and yells, "That ain't Calvin, that's Megatron." The nickname stuck because Calvin literally played like a robot. He was bigger, stronger, faster, and tougher than everyone else on the field. That season, Calvin put up 77 catches for 1,120 yards and a league-leading 12 receiving touchdowns. But more importantly, the Lions went 6-10, which sounds bad, but it was a massive improvement, and in 2011, they finally made the playoffs. But first came 2011, Calvin's true breakout year. He finished with 96 catches for 1,681 yards and 16 touchdowns. Jerry Rice himself said, "This is the most talented receiver I've ever seen play." The Lions made the playoffs as a wild card, but lost to the Saints in the first round. Then came 2012, the year Calvin Johnson did the impossible. Heading into the season, Jerry Rice's single-season receiving record of 1,848 yards had stood for 17 years. Everyone said it was unbreakable. Rice played in 16 games. Calvin would have to average 115.5 yards per game to break it. People said it couldn't be done, especially not on a Lions team that was spiraling again. But Calvin didn't care. He started the season with 164 yards against the Rams, then 207 yards against the Cowboys, where he absolutely cooked the entire secondary. By week 10, he was on pace to destroy the record. But then he hit a rough patch, 3 straight games under 100 yards. By week 16, Calvin needed 182 yards in the final 2 games to break the record, and he was dealing with a knee injury that required him to get his knee drained before every game. Week 16 against the Falcons, Calvin goes for 225 yards on 11 catches. The Falcons double team him on every play, and he still averages 20.5 yards per catch. Heading into week 17, Calvin needs just 72 yards to break Jerry Rice's record. The game is home against the Chicago Bears. It's snowing and freezing cold, perfect conditions for an all-time performance. The Bears know what's happening. They put Charles Tillman and Tim Jennings, their 2 best corners, on Calvin all game, but it doesn't matter. First quarter, Calvin runs a simple slant, catches it, breaks 2 tackles, and goes for 22 yards. Second quarter, Calvin runs a post route, Stafford throws it up, and Calvin boxes out both defenders like he's grabbing a rebound. 15 more yards, he's getting closer. Third quarter, the snow is coming down harder now, visibility is terrible. Calvin runs a comeback route, catches a frozen football one-handed, and turns upfield for 14 yards. He's past Jerry Rice. When the final whistle blows, Calvin has 11 catches for 225 yards. His season total is 1,964 yards. He's broken the record that everyone said would never be broken, and he did it while being double and triple teamed the entire season on a 4-12 Lions team with a knee that was so damaged he couldn't practice most weeks. Jerry Rice himself called Calvin after the game and said, "You deserve it, you're the best I've ever seen." Randy Moss sent him a text that said, "If I could build a perfect receiver, it would be you." But here's where the tragedy begins. Despite being the most dominant receiver in football, Calvin Johnson still couldn't escape the Detroit Lions curse. In 2013, the Lions made the playoffs again. Calvin was still playing at an elite level. First round against the Dallas Cowboys, Calvin put on the greatest playoff performance by a receiver ever. 14 catches for 329 yards, an NFL playoff record that still stands today. But in the final minute of the Lions down 1 point, Stafford throws to Calvin in the end zone. Calvin catches it, falls to the ground, and the ball pops loose for a split second. The refs rule it incomplete, saying Calvin didn't complete the process of the catch. Replay shows he clearly caught it and took 3 steps. Cowboys win, Lions lose. Calvin has still never won a playoff game. And his body was breaking down. His fingers were permanently bent from catching so many contested balls. He had chronic knee problems that required constant draining and cortisone shots. His back was in constant pain from being hit by multiple defenders on every play. He was only 29 years old, but his body was that of a 40-year-old. In 2015, Calvin played 16 games, but you could tell he wasn't the same. He still put up good numbers, 88 catches for 1,214 yards, but the explosiveness was gone. Every moment looked painful. After the season, the Lions asked him to restructure his contract and take less money or be released. On March 8, 2016, Calvin Johnson announced his retirement. He was 30 years old and walking away from $16 million. The sports world was shocked. In his retirement statement, Calvin said, "I've given everything I have to this game, both physically and mentally. I can no longer feel I give the level of performance. My body is broken." Later, he'd reveal just how broken. He couldn't walk upstairs without pain. His hands were hurt constantly. He had trouble sleeping because his knees ached. He said, "People don't understand what NFL players go through. Our bodies are destroyed by the time we retire." But it wasn't just the physical toll. Calvin's relationship with the Lions organization had completely deteriorated. The team asked him to repay $1.6 million of his signing bonus. He refused at first, but eventually paid it. But the bitterness remained. In 2021, when Calvin was inducted into the Hall of Fame, he initially said he wouldn't attend if it was as a Lion. Eventually, he agreed, but the damage was done. Calvin felt the Lions had wasted his career, stuck him on terrible teams, and then tried to squeeze more money out of him when his body gave out. So that's the legacy of Calvin Johnson. Let's start with the numbers. 11,619 receiving yards, 83 touchdowns, still holds the single-season receiving yards record, 7 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons, 6 Pro Bowls, 3 first-team All-Pros. But the numbers don't tell the full story. Calvin played his entire career with a target on his back. Every defensive coordinator game planned specifically to stop him. He was double-teamed on 70% of his routes, triple-teamed on 40%. And he still averaged 86 catches and 1,331 yards per season. Jerry Rice, the greatest receiver of all time, said Calvin was more physically gifted than him. Randy Moss said the same thing. Coaches who faced him said game planning for Megatron was impossible because there was nothing you could do to stop him. But here's the tragic part. Calvin Johnson never won a playoff game. He finished 0-2 in the postseason despite putting up historic numbers. The Lions made the playoffs just twice in the 9 seasons. He played for 6 different head coaches. He never had an elite quarterback, just solid Matthew Stafford. The what-if scenario haunts everyone who watched Calvin play. What if he'd been drafted by the Patriots, or the Saints, or the Packers? What if he played with Tom Brady, or Drew Brees, or Aaron Rodgers? What if he had 5 Super Bowl rings? Would he be considered the undisputed greatest receiver ever? What if his body had held up? Calvin retired at 30. Jerry Rice played until he was 42. If Calvin had just 5 more seasons with his career averages, he'd finish with over 18,000 yards and would be second all-time behind Rice. What if the Lions hadn't wasted his prime? From 2008 to 2015, Detroit went 48-80. They were one of the worst franchises in all of sports, and Calvin spent his entire career trying to drag them to relevance. In the end, Calvin Johnson's career is the ultimate tragedy. A Superman trapped in the worst possible situation, the most physically gifted receiver the NFL has ever seen, stuck on a team that couldn't win. A player who literally broke his body trying to carry a franchise that didn't deserve him. Jerry Rice has the longevity and the championships. Randy Moss has the highlight reel. But for pure physical dominance, for making the impossible look routine, there's none better than Calvin Johnson. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe and comment below who you want to see next.